It's time for another challenge build with D&D Daily and Shard. Shard has joined us this week for the challenge build. Welcome to the Twisted Tentacle Inn. I'm your Innkeeper, and today we'll be building the Vampire Assassin. So if you're not familiar with the challenge builds that I've been making with D&D Daily, basically the concept is we come up with a concept, a short sentence or just a statement, and we build a character around it. Each of us builds it individually from each other. We don't know what the other person is building, and we've been doing this as collaboration with other content creators. We've collaborated with Treant Monk. This week, we're going to be collaborating with Shard. If you haven't heard of Shard's channel, they are a great YouTuber, still growing, and they do a lot of videos regarding current news for D&D, but they also do a lot of rules diagnosis and analysis, as well as character builds. Very good channel. I will post the link for the channel in the video description. Today's concept was a vampire assassin, and I had to clarify. I'm like, do you mean a person who assassinates vampires or a vampire who assassinates? So we decided to go with a vampire who assassinates. I had a really hard time with this build. The main thing is I immediately thought of the Dhampir race, and I wanted to make that bite attack work. The bite is such an interesting mechanic, but it's also a really complex mechanic that doesn't mesh with other features from different classes and such. So it was very, very difficult to make the bite attack work. I thought to come up with maybe getting the charger feat, and I know the charger feat, right? But like a character who just gets one attack per round could benefit from the charger feat using their action to dash, bonus action to do the bite attack, which will then deal an additional 5 points of damage. So that'll eke it up a little bit. But then I ran into the problem that the bite attack is not magical. So as you get to higher levels, it makes it really difficult to make that work. And then the same thing, I thought, okay, the Undead Warlock, single class Undead Warlock could probably work because they can replace a damage from one attack per turn to necrotic instead of piercing. Maybe that would have worked. But unfortunately, there are some benefits to the bite that specifically say that you benefit from it based on the amount of piercing damage that you do. So if you change its damage type, you're not going to benefit from it as much as you really should be. So it was very difficult. I sat down for hours trying to come up with concepts, picking different character classes. I mean, I thought of everything. I tried Monk Way of Shadow. I thought that would be really cool for an assassin. The Undead Warlock, of course. Spores Druid was one that was really big because the Spores Druid, they really lend themselves to a vampire if you really just reskin it just a tad, because they get a lot of spells that kind of mesh well with a vampire character, like Gaseous Form, things like that. Plus, as a Spores Druid, you can choose your Spore Form, where you get all these temporary hit points that will benefit your bite attack, because you get an advantage when you're below half your hit points, right? And you get additional benefits when you're below half your hit points. And that's a really, really difficult thing to pull off. But as a Sports Druid, when you transform into your Spore Form, you gain a bunch of temporary hit points. I mean, we're talking like 4 per level, so you could be getting like 30, 40 hit points at like 9th level. And so that, or temporary hit points, so that would allow you to be at below half, so you can benefit from the bite and still have a nice cushion of temporary hit points. So I thought the Spores Druid might work, but again, I was running into the situation that the bite attack is not magical, and it's very difficult to make it into a magical attack. And then, the Spores Druid also, you can choose to still transform into an animal, so using wild shape. So really cool. You could turn into a bat or a wolf, which is very vampire-like. You could turn into your Spore Form to get those temporary hit points and just go in for the bite attacks. You have the spells Gaseous Form and Cloud Kill and things like that, which are really, really invoking of a vampire character. I really wanted to make that work, and I just could not get it to work, at least with the bite attacks. So I scrapped the Spores Druid, unfortunately. Although the more I talk about it, the more I think I should go back to it at some point and see if I can maybe tweak some things and make it work, even if it's without the bite attack. Because I think that would have been a really cool character concept, a Spores Druid that's actually a vampire. So we'll come back to that. We'll put a pin on it, and at some point maybe I'll make a video about it. So after racking my brain for such a long time about this, I just decided to go with a more simple route. It's a fun character. It's pretty cool. It plays as an assassin who just happens to be a vampire. I know it's not the most exciting thing, but I reached out to the guys just to see what class they were getting now so they could give me specifics on their character build so that we didn't have too much overlap on this one because I was having such a hard time with it. So Gloomstalker is one character class that I wanted to explore as well because I think that would also have been really cool for a vampire assassin. But I think one of the guys will be using the Gloomstalker, so I decided not to go with that. Instead, I'm going to go with a vampire assassin who is a swords bard. We're going to dip into Warlock for 1 level, just for a couple of spells. And this vampire assassin is very good at sneaking into places and, killing things. It's good. Obviously, it's a full spellcaster. I kind of geared most of the spells to make him more vampire-like, so they're a little bit less efficient than you would choose as a bard, but they still work, and they're great for specifically outside of combat uses. And he can hold his own in combat. He's not going to outdamage a fighter or, a straight warlock or anything like that, but he's decent in combat and can do some really interesting things. So let's go ahead and go into it level by level. I'll be fairly quick with each level because I don't want to drag this one on too long. But I think this character ends up being a pretty fun character with a really cool theme, and it's a character that I would play for a one-shot or something. I'm sure you can see my nose is really red. I'm not doing any nefarious substances or anything. I have very bad allergies, and they're really hitting me hard today, so I'm having to keep stopping to blow my nose and stuff. So sorry about that. I might sound a little stuffed up. I'm not sick or anything. It's just allergies. Anyway, so before we begin, quick thing about stats. I generally don't talk about specific stats other than what you should focus on improving first because I don't know what your table's playing with. They could be playing with standard array. They could be rolling stats. I don't want to assume specific stats, so I don't count on a stat being at a specific number because every table's different. And if you plan on using this character, I don't want to just assume a certain stat is going to be at a certain point because that may not be the case for you. So I want to make it as open as possible. So if you notice on all my builds, I do exactly that. So first, when you build your character, we're going to go ahead and choose the Dhampir race. The Dhampir is a half vampire, so they get some pretty cool abilities, including that fanged bite that I talked about at such length early in the video. It is an ability that we're not going to be using too much. Unfortunately, the fanged bite is a very complex mechanic. It uses Constitution for attack and damage, which is really rough because it makes it not synergized with a lot of other things that you would be normally doing. And there are some cool things that you can do with it. In a pinch, it may come in handy if you're below half health or something like that. You may actually be able to get some additional benefits like regain hit points or get a bonus to your next attack. So it's still something to keep in your back pocket in case you ever wanted to get some of those advantages. You also get some really cool mobility benefits. For example, your walking speed is 35, so it's a little bit faster than other character races. You also get the ability to see in the dark, so you have dark vision at 60 feet. You don't need to breathe, which is huge, especially if you're in areas where there's a lot of poisonous gases and such. And you get Spider Climb, which is quite possibly my favorite ability of this race because you have a climbing speed equal to your walking speed. And yes, there are races that get that. But this one, when you get to 3rd level, you can just walk on vertical surfaces and such and have your hands free. So you can actually climb and have your hands free, which is pretty handy to have, especially for a spellcaster. So as you make your character, we're going to go ahead and focus our ability scores mostly on dexterity and charisma. Go ahead and pick dexterity as your highest stat, then charisma, and then constitution. Then the others are whatever. I would recommend wisdom as your 4th highest, just because there are a lot of wisdom saving throws that are pretty common, like fear and charm effects and things like that. And so you want to at least be decent at those. So definitely don't put a stat that'll give you a penalty in wisdom. That definitely prioritize that over intelligence or strength. For a background, we're going to go with the Urban Bounty Hunter because this gives you a couple things. You get the skill proficiencies, options that'll help you be a better assassin and able to break into places. So we're going to pick Stealth and Sleight of Hand as your skills from the Urban Bounty Hunter. That way you are proficient in getting into places. And for tool proficiency, it does give you the option to pick Thieves' Tools. That is huge. That'll help you pick locks and such in the early levels before you get the spell knock. For skills, we're going to focus on several skills, including we already got stealth and Sleight of hand, we're going to go with acrobatics because that would be very important for an assassin to have. Deception, insight, those are really good to have, as well as survival. I would go with medicine as well, or intimidation. Those are actually pretty good. Or investigation. Any of those are going to be good for an assassin, but assassins generally tend to want to be skill heavy because you're going to need to have all these ways to get into places or manipulate people to allow you into places. So any of these skills that I mentioned would be good to prioritize. Then for your character class, we're going to go with Warlock. And for our patron, we're going to choose the Undead. Clearly, you're a vampire, so therefore the Undead Warlock, your creator, the vampire who made you, is your patron, and you have now been turned into a full vampire. So with the Undead Warlock, you get a couple of benefits, like the Form of Dread, where you can transform, get some additional temporary hit points. It's not a whole lot, but at first level, it is a big amount because it can more than double your current hit points if you roll well. And then you can also force creatures to make a wisdom saving throw or be frightened whenever you hit them with an attack. And that's pretty cool because the frightened condition is good to put on enemies. They can't move closer, so you affect their mobility and tactics, and they have disadvantage to attack while you're in their presence. So that's really cool to have and definitely beneficial as you get to the later levels. It's a really good protection. And then you get one spell slot for your pack magic. You get 2 spells that you pick from, but 1 spell slot. So we're going to pick Armor of Agathis and Hellish Rebuke for our spells. For our cantrips, we're going to pick Eldritch Blast and Mind Sliver. Mind Sliver is great because you can help your allies land their spells more easily by affecting creatures with Mind Sliver, so they have to deduct a die from their saving throws. And then Eldritch Blast will be your ranged weapon attack, which will be decent at the lower levels. At the later levels, it'll fall behind, but for now, at least you'll have a ranged attack option that's decent. And for your spells, these are going to come in handy as you get to the higher levels because most of your spell slots will actually be used for these 2 spells. That is part of the build, so we will be using these tremendously. So very important that you get both Armor of Agathis and Hellish Rebuke because throughout your entire adventuring career, that is going to be your priority. At level 2, we're going to go ahead and go to a different class. We're going to pick the Bard class, and in this case, we don't get to pick a subclass just yet, but we're going to go ahead and pick Bard. We get the Bardic Inspiration, which is going to be nice at the lower levels to give to your allies, but you're going to reserve those for yourself later on once you do pick a subclass. Now, one thing to note, we will be behind other characters in regards to the multi-attack ability. We won't be able to get 2 attacks per round until we are level 7, where other characters will get it at level 5. So we'll be 2 levels behind in terms of that. Not a huge deal, but just something to be aware of. Focus on spellcasting once you hit level 5 through 7, but we'll get to that in a moment. For spells, as a bard, we're going to get a few cantrips. We're going to go ahead and pick Dancing Lights and Message. Both of those are really handy for an assassin to have. Dancing Lights could be a distraction. Message would be a way for you to communicate with your patrons or whoever hired you for the job. For first level spells, we're going to pick Bane. Very good spell, especially at the lower levels to kind of debuff some creatures. Disguise Self, that'll help you get around in town as an assassin. Disguise yourself while you're doing your assassinations and then move on. And then, of course, Dissonant Whispers. Dissonant Whispers is a great spell. It provokes attacks of opportunity if you land it on a creature and they run away from whatever they're engaged with. So very good spell to have. Kind of increases your action economy for your group. It can really dish out a ton of damage by proccing those opportunity attacks. So Dissonant Whispers is a deceptively powerful spell that I think you'll be using throughout your career as well. So at level 3, we get additional spells. Unfortunately, we're only going to be able to pick from first level spells because of the fact that we're a little bit behind other characters since we dipped into Warlock early on. Not a big deal. We're going to go ahead and pick Healing Word and Featherfall. As an assassin, you may be going to higher buildings, so it's a good way to run away after your job is done. You jump out of the window and you Featherfall into safety much faster than someone who's trying to climb down the side of a building. Healing Word, of course, in case you're injured or anyone else is injured, would come in handy. So at 3rd level, we're going to continue with the Bard class. We get the Expertise ability, so we get to double our proficiency bonus on certain skills. We get to pick 2 skills. In this case, we're going to pick Stealth and Sleight of Hand. We also get Jack of all trades, so all the skills that we have, we get half our proficiency bonus if we're not proficient in it. So all of our skills are improved. That is pretty big. I love that ability. It's awesome. We also get to pick a subclass. We're going to pick the College of Swords. We'll get to be proficient in medium armor and the scimitar. Very good, because then we don't have to waste spell slots on getting mage armor. So getting medium armor is not bad. It's still not going to make us super tanky or impossible to hit or anything, but it's certainly better than light armor. The other benefit is that we can use any weapon that we're proficient with as a spellcasting focus. That keeps our hands free. That's really good. Now, we get to pick a fighting style. We'll go ahead and pick the dueling fighting style, so we deal an additional 2 points of damage when we fight with a weapon. That'll eke out a little bit more damage and help us a little bit in combat. And we get the ability of Blade Flourish. Blade Flourish is pretty cool because whenever you take the attack action, you automatically increase your movement speed by 10 feet. As an assassin, that's awesome because now our movement speed was already 35. Anytime we take the attack action, no matter what, we're going to boost our speed to 45. You don't have to use, some people misunderstand this, you don't have to use a bardic inspiration in order to get the movement speed burst. You automatically get your movement increase as soon as you take the attack action. So no matter what, every time you take the attack action, you're now moving at a speed of 45. Pretty cool. And that's important because we're going to kind of go over the strategies moving forward with this in just a moment. So you get 3 different things that you can use bardic inspiration to boost yourself in combat. These are called the blade flourishes. So you have a defensive flourish, a slashing flourish, and the mobile flourish. So the defensive flourish is the one that we're mostly going to be using. This one, you deal extra damage with a weapon by using a bardic inspiration die, and then you also add the number that you roll on the die, on the bardic inspiration, to your AC. That's huge. That makes you really hard to hit. So we're going to be using this when we're injured. We're not going to be using this every single round. We want people to hit us because, going back to the spells that we chose as a warlock, we're going to now be upcasting Armor of Agathis before every adventuring day. That way we have 10 extra temporary hit points, and when we move in to attack a creature, we attack them, and then we move away to proc an opportunity attack, let them hit us. If they hit us, then they'll take 10 points of cold damage, and if they don't hit us for 10 damage, the next person that hits us will also take 10 cold damage until those temporary hit points go away. That's pretty huge. And if you want to eke out a little bit of extra damage, cast a Hellish Rebuke. You can upcast it to 2nd level, dealing 3d10 fire damage, or keep it at 1st level, doing 2d10. But like I was saying, most of your spell slots are going to be used on these 2 spells. You're going to keep, when the Armor of Agathis goes down, you're going to keep putting it back up by using your highest available spell slot, and when someone hits you, they take damage from the Armor of Agathis, and you reaction with Hellish Rebuke to deal additional damage. So even though your attacks are not doing a whole lot, if you're doing this on most rounds, you'll be dealing more damage than your fighter or, your warlock. So this is something that's not super sustainable. So save it for, difficult fights. Otherwise, stay in the back and cast spells, Eldritch Blast or whatever. But when you're dealing with some major combats, use this technique, use these strategies in order to eke out extra damage, especially against boss monsters. Once you run out of spell slots, that's where we're going to kind of pull that blade flourish out of our bag so that we can still move in, attack. Now we have a movement speed of 45. We move in, attack, and then move away far enough where they can't reach us on their turn. They'll proc an opportunity attack, but we can add to our AC by spending a bardic inspiration die and boosting our armor class tremendously, hopefully making them miss. And this is going to be the strategy pretty much for the career of this character. I mean, we will be getting higher level spells and doing other things, but most of those things are going to be boosted abilities for outside of combat. So in combat, these are the things that we're going to be doing. We're going to be moving in, attacking with our swords, moving out, proccing opportunity attacks, letting them waste their reactions, and letting them take damage by attacking us using Hellish Rebuke and Armor of Agathis. So when we hit level 5, we're going to get some more spells. So at this point, I don't think I mentioned the spells last round. We did get the ability to select a couple of 2nd level spells. That's fine. They're not a big deal. Most of these are going to be for outside of combat. So we're going to go with Detect Thoughts. That's very, very useful spell. Enhance Ability. We're already really good with skills, but Enhance Ability can boost us even further, or boost an ally. Of course, we're going to pick Knock because that's going to help us unlock doors. Even though we're really good at picking locks, you never know, you might encounter a magical lock or something. Use Knock and get in. Also, at level 5, because you're going to be a 4th level bard, you're going to get an ability score improvement or a feat. Unfortunately, we're going to have to go with an ability score improvement because we're going to be a little bit behind on a lot of things, especially when attacking and hitting. We're going to need to boost our dexterity score quite a bit. So let's go ahead and boost our dexterity score. Generally, I would recommend for a full caster to focus on their casting ability, in this case charisma, but most of our spells don't really require saving throws or attack rolls. Dissonant Whispers does, and so does Hellish Rebuke. So that kind of sucks, that your DC is not super high, but I wouldn't be too worried about it anyways. I think that the Armor of Agathis is going to be your main damage source, and as well as your weapon attacks. So make sure you boost that dexterity, which will also boost your initiative and your saving throws and your armor class. There's so much that dexterity does that I think it's worthwhile boosting that first. And we're going to pick Silence, which we can cast as a ritual because bards are ritual casters. So we can use Silence whenever we're assassinating someone. Make sure no one else hears what's going on in the room. Pretty much that's all you get at this level, so we're going to move on to the next level. As we hit level 6, we are a 5th level bard, and now our bardic inspiration refuels after a short rest. That is huge because so do our pack slots as a warlock. So now short rests are very beneficial to us because we're going to be using our blade flourish more often. We're going to be using our pack slots, or one pack slot, for casting Hellish Rebuke. We're going to pick another cantrip at 5th level. We're going to go with Minor Illusion. Again, very handy for a assassin to be able to make some illusionary terrain, illusionary walls, or something else that could trick someone who is going to be your target. In addition to another cantrip, we do get a 3rd level spell. So let's go ahead and pick Stinking Cloud. Stinking Cloud is fantastic for this character. So if your party is behind, you got a faster movement speed because of your lineage, and also if you make the attack action. So you'll run up to creatures. You can cast Stinking Cloud on a group of creatures. Stinking Cloud is a really, really underrated spell because it can completely debilitate creatures. If they fail their saving throw and they have to make it every round that they're in the cloud, they lose their action for their turn. That's huge, and this can happen every turn. Now, the only drawback, it is a Constitution save, which a lot of creatures are good at, so don't expect it to land on every creature, but you going in there, you go into the Stinking Cloud with them, engage them, so if they try to move away, you can attack them with an attack of opportunity, or if they don't move away, they're still in the cloud, they're being affected by it, right? You, on the other hand, you don't need to breathe. So Stinking Cloud doesn't affect you at all. You're in there fighting these things, and they're at a huge disadvantage while you're attacking them. And you're still using your other tactics, like your Armor of Agathis and Hellish Rebuke, to still combat these creatures. Now, if they're in the Stinking Cloud, I think they're heavily obscured, so they won't be able to use attacks of opportunity. But if they try to attack you, if they happen to hit you, they're going to take some extra damage, right? And if they don't hit you, even better. You keep attacking them because guess what? You're not affected by the Stinking Cloud, and they are. And in addition to that, let's not forget that you always have your Form of Dread. So you have some pretty good control capabilities here. If you use your Stinking Cloud, you disable a group of characters. Maybe you want to attack another group of characters and control them as well. Move up to them, hit them, use your Form of Dread to transform. You get bonus hit points, and you also are now using the Frightened condition on them, or proccing the Frightened condition on them. So they are also now able to move closer to your group. So this character can be pretty controlly on the battlefield if you play it right. It's really fun. It's a really fun playstyle. I enjoy it quite a bit. Now at level 7, you get extra spells, and you also get to attack twice per round. Finally, you're behind on that. You're not too behind on damage because if you're doing things right with Armor of Agathis and Hellish Rebuke, you should be fine in the damage department, but at least getting 2 attacks per round is highly beneficial, especially if you're using Form of Dread and you're trying to create that fear condition on people. Then that is something that you're definitely going to have more chances to hit with if you are making more attacks per round. The additional spell that I would recommend taking would be Non-Detection. I think Non-Detection is a very circumstantial spell, but I think it's pretty important for an assassin to have something like that, because at this level you may be going to assassinate some spellcasters or things like that, so they may have some magical wards or magical divination magic that is going to possibly ruin your chances of killing your target. So make sure that you take something that will protect you from that. Non-detection is a great way to do that. At level 8, you get a 4th level spell. this is because you're going to be a 7th level bard. I would pick one of these spells. None of them are more important than others. So I would pick Freedom of Movement because it's great to not be hindered by difficult terrain or being paralyzed, things like that. That's a great spell, and it lasts an hour, which is really good. You can cast it before going to a dungeon, that kind of stuff. Greater Invisibility because that will really help you getting into places to assassinate people. Or Locate Creature, because if you're looking to find a target, Locate Creature is super handy, especially outside of combat, but even inside of combat. I mean, if there are creatures at this level, you will be fighting a lot of creatures that are invisible or in darkness. Locate Creature will at least point you in the right direction. At level 9, you become an 8th level bard, which means you get another ability score improvement. In this case, I think I would boost charisma a little bit, so I would boost the charisma score either by 1 if it'll get you to the next bonus level, or by 2. If you boost it by 1, use the other point for something else, either dexterity if it boosts you to the next level, or constitution or whatever. But either way, I would say boost your charisma score to get you to the next bonus level. You probably will need it at this point because your spell DC does need to improve a little bit more by this level. It's kind of tough because your abilities are not going to be higher than some other people who are focused on one ability score, but I think that 1 point is not going to make a tremendous difference. It makes a little bit of a difference, but not a tremendous difference. And you get another spell, so 4th level spell slot. Remember the ones that I mentioned for last level. Then at 10th level, you get some more spells. In this case, we're going to go with 5th level spell. I think Dominate Person is a really good vampire-like spell. You dominate another person. I think that's something that is very common for vampires. So that's probably the one that I would go with. Again, I know there are better spells out there, but it can come in handy, especially outside of combat. And of course, very vampire-like. And we're going for theme here before anything else. So we're going to go with that one. And finally, at 11th level, we become a 10th level bard, which is what we're looking for as a bard because we get the very powerful ability, probably the most powerful ability in the entire game of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, and that is Magical Secrets. We get to pick 2 spells from any spell list to use for ourselves, and we can use our own spell slots on them, which is so cool. I think in this case, we're not going to go with super powerful options. Shadow of Moil, I think, is very vampire-like, so we're going to go with Shadow of Moil, and we will be concentrating on that in most fights because it makes it harder for creatures to hit us, and they take necrotic damage if they do. Plus, it combines with the Armor of Agathis, so they'll be taking Armor of Agathis damage. Let's say you do a 4th level casting of Armor of Agathis, you'll have that on you, and if you do Shadow of Moil, any creature that hits you is going to take 20 points of cold damage from Armor of Agathis, plus 2d8 necrotic damage from Shadow of Moil, plus you can Hellish Rebuke them for an additional, if you use a 4th level slot, 5d10 damage, and that's without using any actions, you just use your reaction for that. So I think Shadow Moil is a cool one. Now, it'll be harder to hit you, but it still won't be impossible to hit you. So it'll allow these abilities to remain or to last a little bit longer. And it'll allow you to make your attacks with your sword at advantage because you're going to be obscured. So you'll be attacking with advantage on your 2 attacks, meaning you'll be more likely to hit creatures. So I think Shadow of Moil, for someone who's in melee in combat, is such an underrated spell, to be honest. You're going to be obscured, automatically giving you advantage, giving them disadvantage to hit you. You deal extra damage when they do happen to hit you. And of course, you've got that protection that'll really put out some damage if they happen to be dumb enough to hit you with an attack. Our second spell that we're going to take for our Magical Secrets is going to be Gaseous Form. This is a very controversial pick. I know a lot of people are screaming at their screens right now saying that is a terrible spell to be using Magical Secrets on because you have so many better options for optimization. I know, I'm aware of it. Gaseous Form, though, come on. You're a vampire. You need your Gaseous Form. Alternatively, if you want, why don't you take Polymorph? Then you can polymorph into a bat or a wolf. And Polymorph would be handy, although I'm not a fan of Polymorph. I've said it in the past. It's not my favorite spell when you use it on creatures. If you use it on yourself, fine, but everyone uses it to become a giant ape. Ooh, not my favorite, unfortunately. So I didn't go with that. I know I just made fun of it. I'm not making fun of you for using it. If you like that spell, great. I don't mind playing at tables where someone uses it. I personally don't like to use that kind of a spell. Anyways, Gaseous Form is what I'm going to go with because you're a vampire. turn into a gaseous form. Nothing is more vampire than that. And then for our cantrip, we're going to pick Mage Hand because that's great for an assassin. You definitely could use a spell like that. And we're going to continue on that trajectory for the remaining levels of our character. Nothing really else that's going to be major or, super impactful. You just keep getting better spells. But mostly remember that your spell slots are going to be used on Armor of Agathis, Hellish Rebuke. Pretty much I chose spells that are good outside of combat because you can use spell slots on those spells when you're not in combat, and they will be super handy for you and your group. And if you're doing any assassination, spells like Knock, Gaseous Form, Non-Detection. I would pick Dispel Magic as well at this level. That's a great spell to have in your back pocket. You got Enhance Ability, Detect Thoughts. These are all fantastic spells. Disguise Self. Great spells that you can use outside of combat, and that'll conserve the fact that you don't have other stronger spells for in combat means that you won't be tempted to not use the strategy that this character is intended for. So all these are outside of combat spells. In combat, you're going to be using your spell slots for Shadow of Moil, Armor of Agathis, and Hellish Rebuke, so that you really can dish out the pain on anyone who dares to hit you. So in combat, you'll be fighting with your weapon, which you'll be doing pretty decent damage, taking 2 attacks, and then you'll be attacking at advantage because of Shadow of Moil. And there are times where if you don't want to use a spell slot, you could use your Form of Dread and do the Frightened condition. Or you can use your Blade Flourish to boost your armor class even further to prevent yourself from being hit. So there are a lot of options for you to remain in combat, even though you don't have a tremendous amount of hit points. The cushion that you have from Armor of Agathis, plus the ability to boost your armor class and make you harder to hit, means that you will be pretty survivable in the front lines, and you'll be able to control a lot of enemies as well. And that does it for the Vampire Assassin build. I know this wasn't super out of the box, but I think this is a really fun concept. I specifically went for spells that helped with this assassin kind of theme, and within combat, I think that this will be actually a really fun character to play. That is not super overly overpowered, and it's not going to take a lot of, of the limelight from some of the other characters at the table, but it can certainly hold its own, and whoever's playing this character is going to have a great time with it because it's a really, really fun character concept. So I hope you liked it. I can't wait to see what Shard and D&D Daily do with their characters. They always come up with some great ideas at D&D Daily, and Shard is really cool. I can't wait to see what they come up with as well. So check out their videos. I will post them in the video description down below. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments down below. And as always, I'm your innkeeper at the Twisted Tentacle Inn. Check in anytime. I'll talk with you then. You automatically get... That sounded like German or something. You automatically get your movement increase as soon as you take the attack action.